World Championship Wrestling, otherwise known as WCW, was first founded in 1988 by Ted Turner, and for all of its existence, it was one of the top wrestling promotions in the entire world. Not only that, it had some of the most beautiful World Championship title designs ever made, with legendary holders like Ric Flair, Sting, Bret Hart, Booker T, and even Vince Russo. But now let's take a deep dive into the history of the WCW World Heavyweight Championship title belt. Now, even though WCW was established in 1988, they technically didn't crown a WCW World Champion until January 11, 1991, when Ric Flair defeated Sting to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship and was recognized as the first ever WCW World Heavyweight Champion. And thus, the first WCW title belt was none other than the most iconic belt in all of wrestling history, the Big Gold, which was created by famous silversmith known for making rodeo belt buckles named Charles Crumrine. And if you want a complete deep dive into the history of the Big Gold belt, I made a whole other video. I'll link that in the comments below. But the design, of course, is breathtaking. You have hand engraved sterling silver plates, and you have this nice thick rope border along the edge of the plates. The wrestlers, the crown, the stone holders are soldered on. It's just incredible. And then the plates themselves were on a nice brown strap that throughout the years faded to an almost black color. It's just an incredible belt, but all good things must come to an end because this belt was only around from January 11th, 1991 until July 1st, 1991, when Ric Flair left the company with the world title belt. Now, the reason why Flair left with the title, it's justified. Initially, it was a creative disagreement with WCW Executive Vice President Jim Herd, which led to Ric Flair joining the WWF. But the reason Flair actually kept the belt was because Herd refused to return his $25,000 deposit that the champion at the time had to give up to actually hold the belt. So with no world title, what did WCW do? They had to go to none other than the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, who lent them an old belt from Championship Wrestling for Florida. Now, of course, WCW had to do a little bit of modifications to the belt, which means they really just tacked on some metal that says Heavyweight Champion, and then on the side plates added a couple more pieces that say WCW, I believe. Now, this crude belt was only around for one day at WCW's 1991 Great American Bash, where the title was won by the newest WWE Hall of Famer, Lex Luger, after he defeated Barry Windham in a cage match for the vacant championship, and shortly thereafter, a new WCW World title was created. And the new belt really is one of the most underrated title designs ever. You have this massive globe in the middle, the nice star filler, and then the main plate shape in general is just awesome. The belt was used from 1991 until 1994, and most people mostly associate the belt, and some even call it the Ron Simmons belt. But in the background, the Big Gold had been returned to the NWA and was back to being called the NWA World Title. But WCW was actually changing champions around without the NWA agreeing to it, making it a breach of contract. And in September 1993, WCW left the NWA for good, and in the ensuing court case was actually allowed to keep the Big Gold belt, which they renamed the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship. Which this did not last long because just a couple months later, WCW decided it was time to unify the two belts. In June of 1994, when Ric Flair beat Sting, and WCW opted to return the Big Gold as their WCW World Heavyweight title, and that's how the belt stayed really. But throughout the years, the plates did take a beating, like at WCW Hog Wild 1996, where the title was tagged NWO in black spray paint by Hulk Hogan, and then later the belt would be spray painted again on the January 4th, 1999 episode of Nitro by once again Hulk Hogan, this time in red for the NWO Wolfpack. But at some point in 2000, the Big Gold looked extremely different. The belt seemed smaller and it was actually all gold instead of the dual plated look it was known for. And what happened was WCW actually sent the original Big Gold to the company AFX to restore the belt, and while they were there, they actually made 5 cast copies of the title belts. One for Kevin Nash, one for DDP, one for Jeff Jarrett, and one for Scott Steiner, and then another one for an unknown owner, which I believe was actually AFX Studio themselves. I think they just kept the belt, but Scott Steiner actually swapped his cast copy for the original Crumrine in the late 2000s, but somehow no one at WCW noticed or cared at that point because the company was in such a mess, and his cast copy was used all the way until the end of WCW when it was purchased by the WWF in March of 2001. Now, the WCW title, of course, would make a comeback for the WWF Invasion angle, which was still Scott Steiner's cast copy. But then the WCW title was officially retired after the Invasion angle concluded at Survivor Series 2001. After that, the title was just known as the World Championship. Now, as for the original classic Big Gold belt, Scott Steiner actually held on to that belt before selling it to, I believe, Conrad Thompson, who actually still owns the belt. And I believe he is like Ric Flair's son in law, if I'm not mistaken, which is kind of cool. Ric Flair last was seen with the Big Gold at his last retirement match, which was kind of crazy. But that is the complete history of the WCW World Heavyweight title. Now, it wasn't very long. I mean, there were only really 3 unique belts, which is kind of crazy. But when you have a classic belt like the Big Gold belt, it makes sense that you don't want to change it up too often. But there was actually one unused title design, and that is the custom NWO title. Now, there really isn't much known about the belt, but I would assume this was planned when WCW was kind of thinking about having the offshoot NWO show. Like, I believe, now, I did not watch much WCW. I was strictly a WWF guy, but I believe at some point, like in the second hour of the show, they were like making NWO. And I know they had a couple NWO pay per views and a couple NWO games. I remember playing those, but I'm guessing that's what this belt was used for or planned to be used for. Now, the main plate it's absolutely massive with 3 wolves with fire coming out from the bottom. You have this massive globe in the middle with the NWO logo. And it looks like the side plates were also wolves. For whatever reason, I used to think these were gargoyles, but that really doesn't make sense at all because they're wolves and NWO Wolfpack, I guess. But I would have loved to see this belt just to see how the wrestlers would have carried this beast. I also am surprised no makers have ever tried to do this just to see if they could. I think that'd be kind of crazy. But that is a complete updated history of the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Let me know in the comments below which was your favorite design and what history should I do next. We've covered a lot of the WWE titles. Um, I mean, the WCW would be kind of cool, but we already did the WCW United States title and kind of the history of the WWE because they have the same lineage. Maybe we could do like the ECW World title. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.